Welcome back to another virtual tasting with Binny's. It's Whiskey Wednesday. I'm Pat from the Whiskey Hotline. Joe is here. He's grabbing us some glasses. Brett is looking for his Zoom link, standard thing. We are streaming on Facebook as well, so if you got a question on Facebook, just type it in there and we'll take a look at it and try to get answered for you. Our special guest today is Bill Welter, founder of the Journeyman Distillery. Welcome, Bill. Looking like a mountain man in quarantine still. Look at Bill.
I'm ready for winter. Hey.
Well, I mean, your face isn't going to get cold, that's for sure. So, Journeyman Distillery in Three Oaks, Michigan. It looks like Bill's upstairs right now at Journeyman. Is that what's going on here?
Actually, I'm in the restaurant. Too.
The restaurant.
Kind of
Has your restaurant stayed open through this?
We battled 2 shutdowns in Michigan, 2 3-month periods of closure back in, I think it was all in 2020.
Yeah.
A bit of a blur. Trying to forget it all.
So, Journeyman Distillery in Three Oaks, Michigan. Hopefully, some people are tuning in here have been there because it is a very cool distillery to visit. How many years have you been open now, Bill?
Well, we're going to celebrate 10 years in October. So 10 years of being open to the public. Been working on the project since 2009 and established the business in 2010 and opened the doors to the public in 2011. So we've had a great run. It's everything, basically everything that ever happened in craft distilling for us was totally unexpected. We opened it with the idea that we wanted to open a distillery, and what we did kind of coincided with my experiences in traveling to Scotland and Tasmania, and really just kind of a culmination of business, of places I had been and people I had met, and it kind of translated into what Journeyman is. But fortunately, a couple of years after opening the doors here, we got to stop answering questions about what kind of beer we made and started talking about whiskey. The world became more educated, and I think craft distilling played the biggest part in education of consumers. And I'd like to think that Journeyman played a small role in that as well. And then in 2012, things started to kind of take off, and we so far we've made it. I never feel that we've fully made it, but we continue to operate, and we opened in the tail end of the Great Recession, and now we've survived a pandemic, and who knows what's next? Asteroids, probably.
Feels pretty good to be one of the old guard craft distillers at this point. I get, it's there's very few craft distillers I feel have made it to that 10-year mark, and especially here in the Midwest. Somebody in the chat is already pointing out, making fun of you for looking like David Cross, by the way. So.
Oh yeah, I get that all the time. Thanks.
We're already getting questions about the Bilberry gin. So listen, it's Whiskey Wednesday, not Gin Wednesday, but we'll talk about gin anyway. The Bilberry Black Hearts gin is a criminally underrated gin. That was the first Journeyman product I ever tasted. First time I met you when we were just getting presented the brand initially. Is that the first thing you made?
Actually, the first thing we made was our wheated rye whiskey, which is today it's called the Last Feather Rye, and it's been our flagship brand. We've been making rye since 2010, and really, I'd like to think we were a little ahead of the curve. I think in 2010, rye whiskey sales made up less than 1% of the U.S. whiskey market. Now it's somewhere in the 10 to 15% range. So it's continued to grow. And certainly the fact that our recipe is a wheated rye whiskey, I think makes it extraordinarily unique. And additionally, the fact that, wheated whiskeys have kind of blown up on the backs of Pappy Van Winkle and the Sazerac brand. So, and I'll give all credit to Sazerac. When we opened Journeyman, I lived in Scotland for 18 months and certainly love Scotch, and have tremendous respect for those distilleries. But in America, for me, Buffalo Trace was one that really stood out, and particularly their style of using wheat whiskey, or using wheat grain as a secondary grain in their whiskeys, is something that I kind of just stole. And today, I'm glad we did. I loved rye and I love the wheat, and the combination has obviously offered tremendous success for Sazerac, but also I feel like we've kind of piggybacked on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the more unique rye whiskeys around still. You know, even when people are just doing whatever they can do just to be different at this point.
Right.
All right. So first thing was the rye. You want to answer the gin question? I don't even remember what the gin question was now at this point.
Fan club watching.
Oh yeah, there's a fan club watching too that's posted on Facebook and in the chat now, Bill. So David Cross fan club here.
Yeah.
David from Ohio it's got a whole Journeyman shrine in the corner of his home bar.
I know David. He's a regular Journeyman, even though he lives in Ohio.
So what was
Great
it
guy.
like coming back to Arrested Development after such a long break from the show?
Yeah.
I'm just ready for the role. That's really what we want to know.
I'm gonna lose these glasses and the hat and shave the beard. Just can't see anymore.
Okay, so Journeyman started, you're making rye whiskey, and you had a smaller still set up at the time, right? Hasn't the distillery itself been expanded onto as far as the distilling pit goes?
Yeah, I mean, the distillery here since day one, we always wanted to be a grain to bottle distillery, grain to glass, and we've made every drop of whiskey that we've ever made come out of Journeyman, with the exception of in 2010, I contacted at the time the only existing distillery in the city of Chicago. Obviously, we know the folks at North Shore had a distillery, and I contacted the folks at Koval and said to Robert, we're gonna open a distillery in Michigan, but I'd like to make some rye whiskey before we open the doors. We called that rye whiskey, that first batch, Ravenswood Rye, after the neighborhood in Chicago. Of course, the true Journeyman loyalists know that we quickly received a cease and desist order from Constellation Brands after winning a gold medal in the San Francisco World Spirits Competition in 2012. And they kindly informed me that they own the Ravenswood trademark in the alcohol category, and it dated back to 1972, which predated me as well. So I kind of just threw up my hands, and we acquiesced, and had to change the name of Ravenswood Rye to Last Feather Rye, and that's the same product, but it's just has a different name. And that happened. That's almost 10 years now.
Wow, I remember that.
Yeah.
I didn't know you got lawyered into submission. I just thought it was a name change.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't very nice, actually. So on the back of our Last Feather, we do have a little tribute to Ravenswood Rye. On the back of our Last Feather bottles, if you see there, it says RR, and that's a tribute to Ravenswood Rye. Just a little nod, little homage to our original name. Probably is going to end up in a trademark letter now.
Yeah, probably. I don't know that a lot of Constellation lawyers are watching our Zoom calls, but you never know. You never know. So what other whiskeys did you then start making? I mean, we've got bourbon. We have a confusing array of rye whiskeys at this point, because you have rye whiskey under two names, and then a third one entered the mix.
We didn't stop making rye. Yeah, there's Not a King. That's our other rye. That's our interpretation of George Washington's original rye recipe. I use the term interpretation because obviously we don't have the same yeast strain, the same rye grain strain. All we have is the original recipe, which we replicated, obviously using modern day equipment. Since then, they've got the distillery back up and running at Mount Vernon, and you can go and see it, and they do it all by hand. But the name, each label in our brands has a story. The story for Not a King is that George Washington, obviously our first president, was a distiller, and Washington was famous for having led a battle against the British and was victorious. And a lot of people said, George, you should be king. And obviously he set the precedent that America would be a republic, and he was the first president. So not a king.
You heard it here first. George Washington was our first president.
Just in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
George made some pretty damn good whiskey too. If it was anything like our Not a King, I think he knew what he was doing.
It's delicious.
I'd say so. That's what we're drinking right now, and it's got this kind of chocolatey, just roundness to it that I think a lot of modern ryes tend to be so lean and spicy or grain forward, and this, is just an inviting rye whiskey.
It's just a great whiskey.
I think it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's the recipe is 60% rye. There's a moderate amount of malted barley, and then the remainder is corn. And so in my mind, with that almost 60-40, almost even balance of the rye and corn, it's almost like a rye bourbon hybrid. So you get a little bit more sweetness with this rye with the heavy corn allotment.
And that was close to the recipe they were originally making back then at Mount Vernon?
Allegedly.
No kidding. I always assumed it was a higher rye. I mean, whatever. I've heard people talk about it before, but I guess I just didn't listen.
Yeah, I assumed it was
I'm sure somebody's going to get on here and tell me it's the wrong recipe. So
Bring on Facebook, the one we're talking about now is Not a King Rye Whiskey, which is this bottle here.
Who's the guy on the label?
That's our first president, Joe.
Okay.
Okay. This was, oh, I'm sorry. We're tasting a Binny's hand pick of it from quite a while ago, I guess.
Delicious.
17.
Delicious. You're digging deep into the archives for this get together on Zoom.
Some rare picks.
Yep.
Oh, it's not just limited to rye and bourbon, though. We've had Silver Cross whiskey from Journeyman before. Is that still a thing?
It still is. You can still find that at your favorite Binny's location, I hope. The Silver Cross is equal parts rye, wheat, corn, and malted barley. It's a 4-grain. E.H. Taylor put one out, and we put ours out first. And I had a sip of E.H. Taylor the other night. They're 4-grain, and I like ours better. And I'm not just saying that. I'm our harshest critic. I think our 4-grain is awesome. It's called Silver Cross, which was a medal given in the early days of the British Open. So another cool piece to this product is that we give 1% of the sale of the Silver Cross whiskey to the First Tee and Evans Scholars, both charitable organizations that provide scholarships and leadership opportunities to kids in need. And we're proud of that. I, believe it or not, you wouldn't know by the beard, but I grew up playing the game and actually went to school and played golf in college. And that's actually what landed me in St. Andrews, Scotland for 18 months, which is also what got me started in whiskey. So golf has really been instrumental for my own personal development in life, but also, led me to this crazy whiskey game that we're in. And my hope is that, through the First Tee and Evans Scholars, that we'll continue to give people opportunities like I had. And golf is great, and it's a great game for kids to learn. We have a 30,000 square foot putting green here at Journeyman in Three Oaks, Michigan. And the putting green is free for kids. So I'm looking out the window right now and I see some kids out on the putting green putting, and it's about 58 degrees and windy and raining. So it's a game you can play at all seasons. And, look, if you have kids yourself, we're all looking for ways to keep them off the iPad and out in nature. So come to Journeyman and bring your kids, let them run around on the putting green, make a few putts, and you all can drink a whiskey while they do it.
And it keeps them out of the bar.
Yeah, keeps them out of the bar and keeps the iPad at home.
What's more frustrating, the game of golf or distilling rye whiskey?
Oh God, infinitely frustrating. Never, the best round of my life, I'm sure I walked off saying, "God, it could have been." It's never good enough.
Are you saying your rye whiskey is just good enough as is then?
I'll
I'd
say
say
that
so.
our rye whiskey has continued to get better every year. We've been fortunate to be continually in business now for 10 years. And I like to believe that because we run our still every day, I always say to people, be cautious of the clean still. Our still is always dirty on the exterior, and it's because we're using it every day. So in other words, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, and he said 10,000 hours is the key to success. And I can tell you over the last 10 years, one, we've maintained pretty much the same distilling team through that period, but they've got their 10,000 hours. And I think the best that Journeyman has to give the world of whiskey is still to come. We keep getting better. We have a lot of product in 53-gallon barrels, and we're very
Really?
proud of it. Excited to share it with the world.
Nice.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
excited.
very
I'm excited to taste
excited
that.
to
The
yeah.
last time I was at Distillery was, I mean, probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now, and I don't think you had much in 53 at the time, did you?
Yeah, well, no, you're right. I mean, so like a lot of craft distillers, we started with smaller barrels. We were in 15-gallon barrels primarily. We've successfully transitioned into all 30s at this point, and a couple of years back, transitioned into 53s. But those are just a hair down the road.
So how many different places do you have or facilities, locations aging whiskey now? I mean, it's the distillery itself, you know, it's got that gorgeous event space, the bar and restaurant, obviously. You know, if you're going to fit a putting green in, you can't put a rick house there. So where are all the barrels living?
Well, you mentioned in the email, just kind of sharing, you know, what's down the line. We've been working with music out of Kentucky, and we will soon have Michigan's first Kentucky style rick house here in
No
Three
shit.
Oaks. Yeah,
Busick
so
is for people listening and watching. Busick has a monopoly on rickhouse construction. It's a family that owns a lumber store, a lumber yard in Bardstown, and they also build and they have just the most obnoxiously hilarious, hokey like local television commercials.
You
if
can
you
follow
ever,
them on YouTube.
yeah,
You can follow them on YouTube. They're
I
totally worth
haven't
your
seen
time.
it.
and they have
Shoot
just
the prices down.
it is
Really awesome.
it is outrageously
Love
funny
them.
stuff. And but anyway, so they're the only ones in Kentucky that builds rick houses for pretty much everybody. That's pretty cool, man. You're dragging them up there.
We're seriously, I mean, we're just over the moon about it. We're excited, and those guys have been awesome to work with. They have some amazing stories. They've been in the business for like 100+ years building rick houses. So kind of legends in the industry. It's been fun to talk with them and work on the planning process here. But also, I think, you know, Southwest Michigan is such a big tourist destination, and I think it's going to be another reason to come to Southwest Michigan to, you know, walk through a real Kentucky style rick house, and you don't have to drive all the way to Kentucky to do it.
You got to get them to do a commercial with you. And if anything, just put it on your YouTube channel. So Brett, he's getting a Busick rick house built in Three Oaks.
That's well, have you, and we didn't miss, have you shifted to 53s now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, almost all of our product is in 53s now. Yeah.
Excellent.
My other great
because
achievement,
remember Bill, we talked 2 or 3 years ago, and 2 or 3 years ago, I believe you were insistent that you were just happy in 30s.
you probably talked me into it, Brett.
You shamed him into it.
Yeah, actually, I think our accountant said, you know what, those 30-gallon barrels are kind of expensive.
Right?
Well, you know, I think maybe our greatest achievement will be bringing a Kentucky style rickhouse to Little Three Oaks, Michigan, home of 1,000 people. But our second greatest achievement is going to get Brett out for the opening of it.
That would be fantastic, actually. And you can imagine that, you can put that on the rec site. There are more barrels of whiskey. There are 10 barrels of whiskey for every person in Three Oaks.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Because those are like 30, those are
Yeah.
like 20,000, 30,000 barrel.
If you let him hold the
Rickhouse.
giant novelty scissors, I bet he'll come.
Have to have a big ribbon.
That's right.
Really big scissors.
I would
Hey,
love to do the ribbon cutting.
Brett's got a nice beard.
Well, we're
Haven't
both
seen
keeping
your
them trim
beard.
these days because I don't know how you manage it, man. Mine normally is that long, but when I wear the mask, it curls under like a garden gnome.
I hate it.
And once
I
it
hate
starts
it.
curling,
Yeah.
it doesn't uncurl. So I look like an
Right.
idiot all day.
I
I mean,
know.
more than
It's so
I
weird.
look like anyway.
It's so weird.
Well, mine Bill's and ours look better too because we have the gray, so we're more distinguished. It makes you look distinguished and erudite.
Yeah, I'm so distinguished now, Brett. I had a guy the other day. I was out with my 9-year-old daughter. Keep in mind, I'm 45 years old, and the guy goes, "Are you out with your granddaughter?" And I said, "No, sir. Thank you, though." Getting old's fun.
Hey, it's better than the alternative.
Bill, there is a
still
whiskey. There's a whiskey we didn't touch on yet that Joe and I are trying now, which is the Buggy Whip wheat. So we
Yes.
talked a bit of bourbon, bit of rye, 4-grain wheat. Take us through this one. What's the mash bill here?
Yeah, so 100% wheat. That's all it is. When we started making these wheated whiskeys, the rye and our bourbon and our Silver Cross all have wheat. And I said, let's make 100% wheat whiskey. There wasn't a market for it. I still don't think there is, to be honest. But I
sound
think
business decision.
yeah, exactly right. Well, we're even sounder. We're pushing forward in that category. We're investing dollars into it, but I think it's one of our best whiskeys for the folks on the call here who haven't been to Three Oaks or maybe don't know much about Journeyman. We're located in an 1800s factory building where they used to manufacture corsets and buggy whips. So the name Buggy Whip Wheat obviously is a pickup off of the history here of the factory building. But it's our 100% wheat whiskey. Our wheat, so we make two wheats. One's the Buggy Whip. The other one is called Corsets Whips and Whiskey. And obviously that tells the story of the factory as well. The Corsets is at cask strength. The Buggy Whip is at 90 proof. And both of them are 100% wheat. And I just think they're fantastic. I love them. But, we've also recently been fortunate to have quite a few great accolades. Jim Murray gave the Buggy Whip 94.5 points in his whiskey Bible. The only thing that beat it in the wheat category was Parker's Heritage 25-year-old, which is a little bit more expensive than our Buggy Whip, like 5 times more expensive. But
Slightly less available.
This is actually, we just had a really good question actually that ties right into this. You talk about wheat whiskey. The question was exactly for newcomers to whiskey, what are the most important things to taste, smell, look for? And that is interesting because we've had this debate a lot when we talk about wheat. What does wheat do versus rye? Difference between wheated bourbons, rye bourbons, what contributes what, including corn, because we get into these great debates between wheat and rye, and in reality, bourbon is at least 51% corn, right? So what are you looking for when you're trying to distill 100% wheat versus making a wheated bourbon in terms of taste? What do you think wheat contributes?
I think wheat brings like this really strong butter note. It brings a sweetness, a softness. I used to describe it, when it comes up the still, it's just kind of silky, smooth. The Buggy Whip's my go-to for folks that are kind of entry-level drinkers looking to try whiskey for the first time, but also it brings a level of complexity that really entices the more mature drinker. A common descriptor of the Buggy Whip or the Corsets is creme brulee. It just has these nice burnt sugars, kind of caramelized, and a nice sweetness to it. It's just really for whatever reasons as well, the wheat whiskey, when we distill it, it just drinks soft. So it's actually the reason why it was our first cask strength offering with the corsets, because it just drank so soft. So I'm looking at a bottle at 117 proof, and it drinks light. It just has a lot of robust flavors though as well. It's a surprise to everyone that tries it. It's magnified in flavor, and it's lighter and softer, not unlike an Irish whiskey, but I think it's more flavorful and complex in its own way. So I think hopefully it has a run like Rye has over the last 10 years. And hopefully we can be a part of bringing that wheat whiskey to light in a smaller craft way.
Yeah, well, it has to be, you're right, it has to be characterful, because one of the things we've talked about with very different groups is in the bourbon side of it, does wheat really impart much more than mouthfeel, or is wheat just really something to stay the way out of the corn and give it structure and feeling? So the ability to make, if that's the case, the ability to make a wheat whiskey that has character, because your other light grain is going to be malt if you make 100% malt. But malts, you get like fruit and grass, like you said. In wheat, you get that feel, that thickness and softness, but creme brulee, like white frosting.
Right.
And that's tough to do. I mean, it's like anything that's light, right? If you're dealing with something that is so delicate, it's easy to mess up and it's easy to get off flavors on. So I would imagine that in terms of distillation, it can be even a little bit harder to make sure that what comes through is clean, because it can be it's not going to hide a flaw. If you mess something up, it's not going to hide it.
Yeah, and I would say, most craft distilleries we're no different. In Michigan, we have a restaurant here, we have a bar, but you can only serve what you make. So we had a very strong emphasis early on to make a variety of products. And some of them hit and some of them didn't. And I think that's one of the cool things about craft distilling is you can shift gears quickly. We're not a giant corporation. If we wanted to make a wheat whiskey, we could just make it. And I think the wheat is something that we've done very well, and that we're all very proud of. I should mention Fred Minnick. The whiskey reviewer had significant praise for our wheats, essentially saying that the Corsets, Whips, and Whiskey was the best wheat whiskey in America, and rated very highly overall for him for everything that he tasted in 2020. He ranked it 4th out of everything. So, some of those things, when we sent Fred the bottles, and in kind of a fun family moment, my wife and I, and we have one daughter, Isla, the three of us sat on the couch at our house, and we watched live Fred open our bottles. He doesn't open them in advance, and we're just hoping just for something positive. And then he kind of went nuts about it, and it's just something I'll never forget, sitting there with Joanna and Isla, and just one, being so relieved that he didn't pan it, but two, hearing some great things, and we don't really do it for the accolades, but and no one ever really pats you on the back, right? But
Right.
In that moment, it kind of felt like we had done something well in the whiskey world, and we were really, it felt good. And then it was back to work.
Right. So yeah, now all of a sudden you got something to live up to, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's we're happy with those expectations.
Yeah.
We'll set up a similar live tasting with Brett with you soon.
Yeah. We got to get Brett to 3 outs. It's gonna be my second greatest achievement.
Well, get the big scissors and get the big ribbon, and
We'll do it.
It is. It's not on the way to Louisville, is it?
In a roundabout
We can make it.
Bill, think of all the stuff you've made over the years. Early on, somebody mentioned in the chat, Pitt's Bitter is amazing. Is it seasonal, or will it be available all year?
Yeah,
We've had pit spitter here before.
Yeah, it's available all year.
Okay.
That's been a sleeper for us. We use our Last Feather Rye as the base, and then we're, obviously getting cherries out of Michigan up in the Leelanau Peninsula, and we're soaking something like a pound of cherries for every bottle. So it's rich, it's flavorful, and if you see a bottle, it's bright red, it's just pure cherries. So that spice of the rye still comes through, and it complements that cherry note nicely.
Nice. Brett, one thing we didn't mention earlier when we were talking various whiskeys, we talked a bit about rye and bourbon, and the wheat here was price. I don't have Brett's in front of a computer. We just always want to let people know what they can get these for at their local binnies when possible. And it is pointed out here that you said no artificial flavoring, real cherries here. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Yeah, I should mention that. I mean, it's consistent with everything that we do. Everything's made from scratch. In fact, we bought a farm in Three Oaks, and we started growing some grain here right in Three Oaks. We're, grain to bottle. Everything we do is certified organic and kosher, and everything is real. It's no artificial flavoring, no coloring. Everything is legit. So something that we're proud of. I know you guys know it's not easy making whiskey, so I think that's an underrated part of distilling. It's funny to say.
Now, that was another question I had of all the various whiskeys you're making, the different grains you're working with, which do you find the most difficult as far as consistent results off the still?
The corn, I think the bourbon.
Really?
I think for us, it's been, I think, our biggest challenge. Everyone says that rye is one of the harder grains to work with in terms of physically working with it.
Yeah, so you see, that's a handling issue as much as a distillation issue, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a pain in the butt.
Although if you gelatinize, then you're screwed for a lot of reasons, right?
Yeah, it's thick, it's heavy, it's hard to work with. But in terms of, I would say our Featherbone bourbon is a real great reflection, though, of what I think craft distilling really should be. And that is a reflection of the local agriculture, the grain we're growing. The water here in Three Oaks comes out of an aquifer, and it's our own unique distillation styles make up what that whiskey is. And we're not trying to replicate Kentucky bourbon. And in some ways, I said early on, why try and replicate something that's great? Let's make something that's unique to us. If people like it, that's great. If they don't, then so be it. But we'll do it our own way, and hopefully people respect that. And it's even better if they like the whiskey. We're all the better for it. So nice. I mean, I think it's part of that ideal of what craft is, I suppose. And in the same way, I would say Buffalo Trace is a craft distillery. They're doing the same thing. So I'm happy with our with that ideal of sticking to our guns and not acquiescing as we could have many times over the last 10 years into kind of following some of those other distilleries that chose to source whiskeys or go down a little different path.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've definitely honed in on what you guys do well. It's you mentioned it early on about how you thought the whiskeys were tasting better and better, and I agree. I mean, the whiskeys are spectacular, and they really are. And it's just and you've kind of developed this house style too. I mean, these things nobody else is doing like that. Not a King mash bill. Nobody